Hey, just a really quick public service announcement. The bar's going to be open in 5 minutes. Beer and wine, $5. Get into it.
Intro? Yeah. Okay, everybody, if we can all assemble, we're about to begin again for the second half of the presentation.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, clicker. Okay, is that a... Okay. All right, thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. Now, this, to me, is a very important gesture towards the para-academic. That you're going to have a glass of wine while you're talking. And loving it. Okay, now, what am I going to do? I've got... Right. No, I'm going to take my part of this talk to talk about the other worlds component of other worlds and space opera. I mean, of course, the thing about space opera is it's a particular form of sci-fi, and I'm sure you're more than aware of this. So this will be a very brief remark, but it has to be epic in scale, right? It has to be almost sort of Odyssean in its scope. That it best, if it happens within a short period of time, that period of time is situated within the long-termism that Leon was talking about. That's to say, we're talking about like thousands, hundreds of thousands of years for this like development of a vast, usually intersidereal or at least interplanetary, probably even intergalactic complex and concordance of civilizations. So the short term has almost nothing to do with space opera in its overall stratagem, but of course it's absolutely crucial for the narrative, because each element, each episode is a kind of encounter with something that disrupts the long-term concordance of these vast civilizations. And I'll explain that with a little bit when I show you my clips. But I wanted to just talk a bit about the way, a very crucial thing about space opera, I think it's probably more so than most other genres within sci-fi, is the necessity to demonstrate your capacity to build a world. So world building becomes, if you look at most manuals on, like creative writing in sci-fi and so on, they deal with world building like this. You see, there's just this massive amount of stuff that you can get on the internet or through Amazon, for instance, or anything like that. And world building like this relies on, a bit like the encyclopedia, it relies on a kind of thoroughness, almost exhaustive demonstration of not just plausibility, but of law. Law becomes absolutely critical, like natural law, civic law, social law, things like that. And that's what forms the not just plausibility, as I said, but also a resemblance by analogy to the world that we live in. So world building is often in space opera a kind of attenuation, even in some cases an etiolation of the current world. I mean, in a sense that, of course, Starship Troopers, you can read that if you want to read it, the book, if you want to watch the movie. The crystallizations and kind of exaggerations to the point of parody and fetishization of existing technological and social behavior. So to give an example of world building, and the thoroughness of what's required, here's a quick step through one such work. You can see it starts with these tips that go, down 1 to 7 about how you need to model the world, and it keeps going into religious beliefs, for instance, political beliefs, language diversity, social hierarchies, and climate and character diversity, and education systems, cultural taboos and norms, family structures, invent mythologies, look for hidden secrets, think about the art and entertainment, the clothing, seasonal changes, ruins of ancient civilizations, moral ethical codes, political intrigue, medical practices, currency, economy, celestial events, all different kind of cultures. If you were to invent non-humanoid cultures, the metaphysical realms, parallel time realities, agricultural terraforming, mental health practices, and finally, you get up to 100, which is cosmic events or cosmic phenomena. If you're capable of doing that, you have invented another world, right? And that's a very, very short manual, right? Some of these things are like hundreds of pages in length, taking you through the techniques for doing it. They're all critical, of course, for, as I say, for a space opera. And the opera in space opera, it's a kind of exaggerated phrase, but there aren't many actual literal space operas. The first one the first image that came up, what I completely forgot was there, was of course Aniara. Now, some of you will be familiar with the recent film version of Aniara, but it actually goes back to a late 1950s Swedish epic poem, a poem that was written almost like the same scale as something like the Odyssey. It's told in about 105 or 103 cantos in this extremely sort of dense metrical style. That was then turned into an opera, again a Swedish opera with music, atonal music performed in an operatic theatre. There's a TV version of it that was made in 1960, Swedish TV. You can find that on YouTube. If you can cope with it, it is like peering into a Sony Porta Pack image. It's like this ghostly black and white, hovering thing with a group of robotic, not robotic, maybe more like kind of Greek chorus figures, an extremely abstract and inert stage. The story of Aniara is, of course, that of a spaceship, like an Elon Musk fantasy. It's leaving the dying Earth and it's heading to Mars, but it gets knocked off its course by a tiny, tiny celestial object, right? Tiny little thing that just chips away at the navigation system and sends the spaceship off through the solar system, out of the solar system, and forever, like towards nothing. Well, it does have a destination. I think it takes well beyond the span of the kind of like remnants of the human race to get there. Anyway, where am I going with this? There are a couple of very famous, huge kind of like novelistic structures of space opera. And as I said, the operatic aspect of it is its emphasis on melodrama, on a kind of great rush of kind of lyricism in the embrace of these huge stories with, that kind of condense down to highly melodramatic relationships between characters. And Ian Banks's culture is probably one of the most enduring recent examples of this. He wrote it over, about 20-something years, from about 19... What?
Yeah, at least 20 years.
Yeah, 87 to about 2012. He died a little while ago. The culture, it's across a whole string of books like this, and it turns up in a lot of other short stories of his. It's a sort of utopian, galactic culture, society, let's say, populated by humanoids that they all live off planet or in touring spaceships, and their main occupation is to deal with lesser civilized, lesser advanced cultures that they come across. So there's the humanoid element. There's also another species, more like kind of entities, I guess, in the culture who are called minds, and they are super intelligent AIs. They do all of the kind of benevolent, administrative work of a mega state. In the culture, Banks called the culture a space socialism, because like a lot of accelerationist ideas now, it's a world or a galactic empire, or not empire, I suppose it's a galactic kind of syndicate that where technological automation has removed the need for labour, and so it's a post-capitalist economy. There's almost no need for work, and because there's almost no need for possession and property exchange and things like that, there's almost no law enforcement or enforcement of laws. There are, in fact, almost no laws. The only laws that pertain are the ones like the world-building ones, which are extremely strict and rugged in his universe. I won't go into all the details. I mean, for all of the schematic nature of what it sounds like in my my reduction of it, and for all the well-ordered governance, galactic governance that happens, the book's actually full of melodrama, of incredibly broad comedy, almost like Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide, and also full of religious warfare and ethnic violence. And they're incredibly violent at times, in a very, very engrossing way, I have to say. But all of this violence is kind of to do with the fringe societies, the barbaric societies that the culture encounters or tries to assimilate. They can be on the fringes of the galaxy, or they can be hidden, undiscovered enclaves. Another one that I would recommend having a look at, that's just to give you an example, these are so vivid that a lot of fan fiction in Photoshop can generate many of much of the imagery and illustration. It's a kind of next step on from the kind of covers that Leon was talking about, that these things aren't necessarily attached to publishing, but to the fan base of people who follow these space operas with the kind of attention to detail that, say, Homer scholars would apply to the Odyssey. Here's another one of my favourites, is the kind of universe of Revelation Space that is developed by Alastair Reynolds throughout his work. Revelation Space is really like an absolutely engrossing domain. It's a world where humans have uploaded themselves into navigation systems of spaceships and so on. It's very, very clever, and I think quite engrossing. Reynolds has recently shifted out of this hard space opera into a kind of steampunk style, but I think these are worth looking at. Another one here. Oh, that's to indicate that they're so detailed that in addition to the fan imagery, you can get galactic and planetary maps of this beautifully named Revelation Space. Another couple of quick ones. Ian McDonald's Lunar series about rampant lunar industrialization in the far future, which has created a kind of crossover of corporate and feudal colonization. It's where air, water, carbon, and data as well are all considered to be essential consumables, the consumption of which is monitored and surveilled by the corporations. and which is subject to market forces, right? So the air and the water is. I mean, I think you find this in what The Expanse has done something like this too on not Netflix, I think, or whatever. All inhabitants in this series quite spectacularly detailed, and it's almost like Succession, the kind of corporate warfare that goes on in these books. Absolutely destined to become a TV series. It'll be expanded into really long form narrative without a doubt. I mean, 3 big fat books, pretty good anyway. McDonald has done a couple of really brilliant sci-fi, really like edgy, unplaceable sci-fi stories. One set on the Amazon, and another, my very favourite of his, called The Dervish House, which is set in Istanbul. Highly recommend that. It's a kind of version of Dickens' Bleak House. It's about a huge data and kind of crypto coin scam that happens in Istanbul, but it's all about running gas lines, like the Nord gas line out of Russia into Europe and things like that. Very clever. And so he brings all of that kind of very, very clever observation about contemporary economics and so on into this melodrama about the corporations on the moon. The inhabitants of the colonies on the moon, which are very grim kind of places, but they all live under corporate law rather than any civil or criminal law. And the societies are kind of run like Las Vegas casinos. So there's abject squalor alongside orgiastic parties, cocktails and hallucinogens run rampant. 5 families run the moon. They're like houses or clans. And among them, very appropriately, is the mining giant of the Mackenzies, which is an Australian dynasty modelled on Gina Reinhardt, without a doubt. Anyway, another, very quick, I'll just get through this very quickly. Aliette de Bodard, a Canadian writer, she's kind of created a string of romance, young adult fiction as a version of space opera, and particularly with her fabrication of what she calls the Julia universe, that's XUYA, in which martial arts scholars are astronauts, where spaceships are sentient, queer, and have sexual relationships, as well as having family lineages, which creates the melodrama and the violent interactions and competition between them. It's a universe occupying a slipstream timeline where European nations have collapsed, China colonised the Americas, and Vietnam has dominated the space race, forming a kind of vaguely Confucian, which I think is not actually right in terms of the Vietnamese culture that she's bringing in, but a kind of Confucian planetary empire. And finally was something very, very simple, but Martha Wells's Murderbot Diaries. I'm very fond of these. I think they're quite very sweet. They're about a murderous cyborg, so they're naturally very sweet. These are set in an interstellar society run by ruthless mega corporations. You can see the pattern over and over again, that use security cyborgs, like the eponymous diarist, to carry out espionage, assassination, corporate military warfare. Other cyborgs and humanoid species in this universe are drafted into slavery for mining, or they work on starships that are like ancient galleys, and they're like the galley slaves. Human inhabitants are opiated by implanted entertainment feeds. And our hero, the jaundiced, wisecracking murder bot, he's a bit like Deadpool, the way he talks, gradually comes to acknowledge, if inconveniently, the ethical and sentimental qualities of his human victims, when not binging on entertainment media, which he does a great deal of, because everything's in play. He could just like take a break. And now, I mean, there are so many other kind of examples of this invention or fabrication of internally consistent, vaguely kind of analogical universes that play with stylistic features. They don't have to be all cybernetically advanced things. I would actually recommend it's a very young adult, very much kind of like late childhood series of books called Mothlight by the English writer Philip Reeve. And Mothlight is, the world of Mothlight is where, I think you might have been mentioning something like this to us in the break, where people actually travel between planets on 18th and 19th century ships with sails. They're kind of solar wind sails, and they travel across the interplanetary spaces like that. It's a very joyous thing. It's very steampunk. It's got a lot of illustrations in it, which are quite delightful, and it's clearly meant for a very young audience. But it nonetheless, it exhibits the same rigour of planetary and celestial architecture that the other examples that I'm talking about have. I guess behind this there is a sense that the most world-building schemata that young writers or new writers in sci-fi will encounter obey a kind of encyclopedic principle, and that is that you really need to be able to cover every possibility that can be thought of by your reader. And of course, the world building here is very much like gaming. I'd say, the biggest one that I've played, Assassin's Creed, I think, an extraordinary thing. The Assassin's Creed one set in Greece, I think, was possibly the biggest database for world building that has ever been done in a computer game. And to play it, you really have to almost accommodate this encyclopedic scope of what is available to you and what you can and cannot do according to the plausibility rules of that universe. And that's to say, I guess, like most encyclopedias, they are cosmoses that are bound by rules. The other kind of thing that I just very quickly draw your attention to is, as a kind of adjacent to the encyclopedia, there's a thing called the abecedarium. The abecedarium is a very simple form of primal kind of encyclopedic presentation. It's didactic, but it's also pedagogic. Unlike the encyclopedia isn't really pedagogic; it's something you go to as a resource. But the abecedarium is a form of pedagogy. It goes right back to ancient Rome, and we have it in so many versions now. It's like Sesame Street. A stands for and B stands for. So A might stand for. Edward Gorey. Thank you. Yes. And Edward Gorey's version is, of course, delightfully malicious and wicked and mischievous. So the abecedarium is usually something in its more straightforward form that is meant to teach children, to make them literate, and to teach them the rule of alphabetization, right? That A follows B, follows C, follows D. Sorry, the other way around. A precedes B, precedes C. And so, as I said, I'm trying to think of give me a fruit that starts with A.
Apple.
Apple, thank you.
Orange.
You can tell.
A pineapple.
You can tell it never had any effect on me as a child learning to read. A is for apple, B is for banana, C is for cucumber, right? And that creates a world. It creates a world where you can itemize these things, and they all occupy a kind of natural category. But if you played a little game and you said, A is for athlete, B is for beard. C is for crust, right? How would you fit those things together, right? What the image that you'd come up with is something that's not categorizable. It would, in fact, be like, an exquisite corpse. It'd be this kind of like, like an attempt to kind of like communicate across some kind of incommensurable fold or gap between these letters. And I think that aspect of the kind of mischievous abecedarium is something that can happen in space opera. And at the end of my talk, very soon I hope, I'll try and give you an example of that, okay? But the first example that I want to deal with, which is kind of the opposite of that and the more straightforward one, is... Why have I gone backwards? Well, not this. I was going to give you the Star Wars world, to indicate just how perfect that is, but I'm not going to do that because you all know it. I'm going to do another one. Oh, yes. Before that, this little moment, a moment in Doctor Who, and I'll have reason to come back to Doctor Who, just to indicate that no matter how kind of like encyclopedic and vast space opera can be, often it plays games with parochialism. And one of my favourite examples of this comes from the reboot, the first episode of the reboot of Doctor Who in 2005, which Stephen Moffat came in as the scriptwriter under the showrunner, mad maestro, increasingly hysterical one, Russell T Davies. Very good on them. They got money from BBC Wales, had to often be set in Cardiff rather than in London or on other planets. Part of the deal with getting BBC Wales behind it. So you've got these very strange kind of like, jumps, like why the TARDIS would turn up in Cardiff on the docks of Cardiff, but it repeatedly did. And the two actors who were in the first season, you'd have to tell me, was it the 9th incarnation of the Doctor?
Oh, God.
That's a really hard one, isn't it? I think it might be the 9th. The Doctor, it goes through various incarnations. He dies and comes back in a new form, which is to say a new actor gets the job. But this particular incarnation, which was the big reboot of 2005, Christopher Eccleston played the Doctor, and his travelling companion, which is a feature who runs, she's like a choric figure who runs through the whole, she or he or it or them or they. There's so many different versions of the travelling companion. In this case, the travelling companion was played by Billie Piper as Rose Tyler, right? And they're having a conversation. Now, the thing is, Rose Tyler, she had a very strong Cockney accent in this, right? And Christopher Eccleston, well, he's from Manchester. So I grew up in Salford, went to the Salford acting school. I know Manchester rather well, having lived there for some time. And his accent is Mancunian without a doubt, right? Very northern. So at one point, she says to him, come on. She says, oi, if you're an extraterrestrial then, how come you got a northern accent? And he thinks for a minute and he says, well, a lot of planets have got a north. Beautiful.
It's a great line. Yeah.
Great line. Yeah. Well, that kind of parochialism, which is a joke in, it's a sort of meta statement joke in Doctor Who, as so much in Doctor Who is actually like, there's just a level of statement in this film. I'm going to show you now some excerpts from it. And I warn you, it's not, look, directed by Luc Besson, who I have a great deal of respect for, right? Luc Besson, Leon, the professional, Leon, another Leon, equally an assassin, I think. But beautiful films. I know, yes. What else?
Elephant.
Sorry?
The fifth elephant.
The Fifth Element, of course, which is, you know, not quite a space opera, even though it's got an opera singer in it. But Nikita, and the latest one, Anna, is very good too. But this is the most expensive independent film ever made at $223 million, American, and it's an abject failure, except for the opening scene, which I'm going to show you now. This is the film called Valerian, which I hope will run.
There we go. Yeah, press that really long time.
Can you press that for me, mate?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
No. Hang on, I'll try it. There we go.
Ground control to Major Tom.
7, 6,
Commencing countdown, engines on.
3, 2.
Check ignition and may God's love be with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade. And the papers want to know whose shirt you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in the most peculiar way. And the stars look very different today. For here am I sitting in a tin can, far above the world. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do. Though I'm past 100,000 miles, I'm feeling very still. And I think my spaceship knows which way to go. Tell my wife I love her very much. She knows. Ground control to Major Tom, your circuit's dead. There's something wrong. Can you hear him, Major Tom? Can you hear him, Major Tom? Can you hear? Am I floating on my tin can? Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do.
The Alpha Intergalactic Space Station has reached critical mass in orbit. Its weight and size now poses serious threat to Mother Earth. In its great wisdom, the Central Committee has decided to use all resources necessary to release the space station from the Earth's gravity. Its new course is set for the Magellan Current. Like the great explorer Magellan, the Alpha Station will journey into the unknown. A symbol of our values and knowledge, it will carry a message of peace and unity to the farthest reaches of the universe. Our thoughts and prayers go with you. Godspeed and good luck.
Just by the way, I'm sorry, grabbing that clip. The iMovie didn't give you the edges, so we just a little bit of action on the side. Anyway, this is, I think it is actually a very compelling opening sequence, pre-credit, and as it shows you this like step-by-step evolution of human encounters with otherness and with the aliens. But of course, the thing is, there's like a formal continuity across each of these scenes. But it's not just the continuity of, say, the format of an official kind of diplomatic welcoming party, but also the postulation of universality. It's a decorum that makes the phosphorescent tentacular jellyfish and groper-like species with fins, makes them don bipedal spacesuits with 2 arms terminating in hands with opposing thumb and forefinger in order to be able to walk into the human space station and shake hands. There's only one moment where the handshaking doesn't happen, which is the bow, this takes the place of but it's in effect the same thing. It's a little joke to only stress the universality of the handshake. So it isn't just humanoid morphology, even with prostheses, that discloses this universality of contact, but the handshake as well. The handshake underwrites, as a guarantor, an almost Kantian imperative in the plotting of this sequence of episodes. If the hand is the aesthetic emblem of the universal, then the handshake is its ethical emblem. And one more phantom oversees this universal and actually grants it absolute authority. And that is God. God is still around, despite all the cultural and religious and ethical contacts and copulations that must have occurred, because at the end he says, Godspeed. Godspeed, right? No matter how complex it is, the cosmos is still under a God, is still a universe, one thing. Still a kind of parochially single place, like a kind of almost like a city with its suburbs. It's a place where no one truly is a stranger. In other words, the cosmopolitanism of this sort of opening suggests that, in fact, the universe is a place where everyone will be welcome eventually, right? And that kind of welcome doesn't necessarily inhibit violence. It's like in the culture and in many of the other great operatic scaled systems, there is no place for estrangement or a stranger. So it's that enclosure that happens, that's signalled in the beginning of this film, that makes the universe homely, makes it the providence, in fact, the providence as well as the provenance and province of a God superintending the journey into the unknown. There really is no unknown left in Valerian, in the movie. Now, the next thing that I'll show you, I'll only show you a moment of, because after that extraordinary, I think, quite well-crafted opening, the whole movie collapses in one image. Go on. Yep. This is straight after.
Milaine.
Malone.
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 Malone. Agak bela.
Can we stop that somehow? I'm just trying. I thought I'd be able to stop it. Yeah, just hit pause.
Malone.
Thank you. It's grotesque. I'd like to think that kind of like descent into kitsch was intentional, but I really don't think it was. The planet Mull, right? This sort of sub-avatar world where its inhabitants as well as its viewers are held in this constant spell of wonder all the time. This sort of land of cocaine plenty. I don't mean cocaine.
You mean the land of cocaine?
I mean the land of cocaine. How can I? COCKAIGNE, that cocaine. With these willowy, wispy supermodels, all looking like an adolescent Melania Trump. And, you know, sure, it has all the sordid signature lineage of a Gauguin-esque paradise, of Orientalist erotica, and of Little Mermaid sentimentality. But as with the future human species of Aryan imbeciles in the Arcadian post-history, a story by H.G. Wells, The Time Machine, those Aryan, idiots, Eloi, which is, by the way, a cute name for God, as well as the chosen people. Obviously, you know, they're nothing to do with kitsch. They're one of H.G. Wells's very sharp barbs. These iridescent bodies that have alimentary canals, but evidently no need to eat or defecate. They have sexual organs with no need to desire. They have language with no need to communicate. They're creatures of spectacularly useless superabundance, their only labour being to maintain their post-historic playful bliss beyond any provincial evolution of a leisure class by gathering their manna in those superabundant pearls, right, that can do everything from wash their face, you know, to God knows what else, you know, because they are, you know, they are simply like an absolute of energy, right? But, of course, et in Arcadia ego, just as the Eloi in Wells' story were actually chosen and bred as cattle by the dark unconscious glimmered in the cannibalistic Morlocks who lived underneath, so the paradise of these supermodel waifs is doomed to trouble. And in fact, there is one brief, you know, like reprieving moment from this hideousness of this scene at the end where, you know, glorious Melania looks up and sees the sky blacken into these sort of blister forms out of which, like pus, these things come down onto her earth to steal the pearls, right? To you know, and to annihilate, you know, to completely blacken her world. So one more little quick episode from this that I'll screw it up and throw it away. And this is where the character Valerian, now, I mean, the plot of this film is so ludicrous. Okay, maybe based on, you know, like a comic book or graphic novel, but really it's a dog of a film. The plot is pointless. The interactions between this guy, what's his name, Don DeHaan or something like that, and Cara Delevingne. Now, Cara Delevingne's not, I mean, she's not a great actor, but she was very good in, what was it called? The TV series that she was the kind of fairy in, Something Row.
Oh, yeah. Something Row.
You must have seen it.
You must have seen it. Something very steampunky, and it's got that guy in it. You know the guy? who was in
Bloom.
Bloom, got Orlando Bloom.
Orlando
in it.
Bloom.
It's got her in it, and it's called Something Road.
Yeah, I can't remember it either. Anyway, that's pretty good. That's worth watching. She's good in that, except for the conclusion, the last episode, which should be thrown out like that image, screwed up and thrown away. But the rest of it is very good. Anyway, there is absolutely no chemistry between these two. They're supposed to be detectives, like looking for this pearl that's been stolen, and it's rubbish. Anyway, have a look at this scene. This is where that's the guy in the kind of Las Vegas Hawaiian shirt style thing goes to this huge kind of caravanserai on a planet. It is the city of 1,000 planets that he goes to. I'll show you this, and you get an idea of what I mean by the parochialism of the universe in some space opera.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Please gather round, gather round. Now, my name is Tazit, and I am your guide for today, okay? Now, whose first time is this at Big Market? Okay, lovely, lovely. Wonderful, wonderful. Now, let me remind you that Big Market is in another dimension. You won't be able to see it without your helmet or touch it without your gloves. But there are nearly 1 million stores in Big Market. Yes, okay. We have 1 hour. Now, please watch the letters at the top and verify that the U for human is full green, okay? So everybody, please get together right behind your guide, whose name is... David! Come on, let's go! Okay, follow me, please. Put your helmets on. Go through the gate. Okay, activate your system. Wonderful. Okay. Do not
System activated.
Activate your system, please. Welcome to Big Market.
Hi. Yes, sure, of course. Bill, can I have my camera, please? Thank you. Say cheese. Thank you, Bill. You're good.
Thanks.
What the hell are you doing, soldier?
Sorry, sir.
Keep an eye on the guy, right?
Yes, sir.
Just think, baby, 1 million stores.
Only stuff that we can carry, okay?
I promise.
All right.
So this city of 1,000 planets is like, you know, it exists in multiple dimensions. What you get on the surface effect is something that looks like Burning Man, but you go into that and you find yourself in this cosmic caravanserai, right? This is a meeting of caravan routes. Now, in Star Wars, I mean, these sorts of things are not unfamiliar to you. I mean, in Star Wars, you'll remember that Han Solo, for instance, goes into a saloon, like a Wild West saloon at one point. And so that sort of nostalgia for past movie references is really in the kind of intertextual strategy of the whole Star Wars thing. You know, like you're jumping from World War II fighter pilots or movies about fighter pilots and so on to the Wild West. In this case, you know, what's probably intriguing is that instead of having gunslingers, gold diggers, snake oil salesmen, corrupt officials on the outskirts of an empire, Valerian is kind of like the core, the epicenter of the whole thing. Not Valerian, the city of 1,000 planets. Valerian's the character. But its comparable site is a shopping mall, right? A kind of cosmic kasbah or souk, modelled like a lot of futuristic cities are modelled on amalgams of Hong Kong and Tokyo and New York and so on. But this is a kind of fantastic carnivalesque enlargement and aggregation of all those earthly prototypes. What it does is it breeds a kind of familiarity with us. It's epitomised in the tourist couple who speak with Midwestern US accents, who collect at the end of this. They're coming up with armfuls of souvenirs, going through a security scan to leave this city of 1,000 planets. So there's, in fact, a kind of provincialism here that's engorged rather than, say, disturbed. Now, there are ways in which this kind of world building can be disturbed. One of the more famous ones that I hardly need to tell you about is Jorge Luis Borges's famous story, Tlon, Uqbar, and Orbis Tertius. And of course, in that short story, what Borges does is recount the invention of a fabulous country, sort of placed somewhere in Asia Minor, but it doesn't exist, called Uqbar, and it's been, as his short story explains, as he goes into he discovers it by accident with his friend Buenos Casares in an encyclopedia entry, but it's only one copy of one edition of one encyclopedia that carries this mysteriously extra entry under Uqbar, and gradually he investigates it and finds out that it is in fact the whole thing is the creation of a kind of cabal, a group of Hermetic philosophers in the 17th century, originally in the 17th century, who passed on this task of inventing another world, inventing a completely different world that had its own philosophy, its own natural sciences, its own art, its own economy, and so on and so forth, at an encyclopedic scale. And eventually, like in 1940, he tells a story. The essay was published originally in 1940. He says, in 1940, he discovered the first encyclopedia of Tlon, which is the planet on which Uqbar operates, inhabits in a completely parallel, kind of like impossible spatial dimension to Earth. Now, of course, the trick of this is that it's a fiction, and you know it's a fiction, and he presents it as a fiction, and then he adds his famous postscript, allegedly written in 1947, 7 years after the original thing was published, and at the time, of course, in the future, where artifacts from Tlon start to appear in the real world. So the strategy, his particular fictive strategy in this, is to kind of unseat by tricks with kind of idealist philosophy, with Bishop Berkeley and all sorts of things like that, but to unseat the authority of this world, not by creating a kind of exaggeration of it, a parody or an extension or attenuation of it, but to supplant it, to take its place. Now, that's very clever, but of course, and it's a crucial part of storytelling, right? So his short story is a kind of emblem for the very notion of what fiction is. It's a metafiction in a way. But that kind of storytelling we have experienced lately has undergone something of a problematic turn. We're now getting very suspicious about this kind of creation of alternate universes. In fact, so many news broadcasters on mainstream news like MSNBC have talked about how 50% of the United States lives in an alternate universe. They live on Earth 2 is the phrase, right? So I think we're getting somewhat suspicious of this kind of fictive stratagem of supplantation. And I'd like to then conclude by maybe giving us a little bit of hope from this, which, just a few examples of what's happened in the United States recently, and just my little trick to bring us back to a very famous Doctor Who episode, again written by the genius Stephen Moffat, the Weeping Angel. I won't go into that. This is just a trick to get us back to Doctor Who and to the TARDIS. And the thing I like so much about Doctor Who is, of course, that let me go to my notes to try and make it as quickly readable as I can, because I know we're at the end of our time. So one of the things that's so appealing about Doctor Who is, of course, that he is many things. I mean, he is a she, he is a they, he is an it at times. We know that there are some... I had a clip from... a deleted clip from Doctor Who, but I won't play it. Maybe later if you're interested. It's a great moment where he's talking to Amy Pond, Karen Gillan's fantastic figure. But I won't play that. It ends with him opening the doors of the TARDIS, because she's like berating him about how nothing makes sense. Everything's like a contradiction. All of the things that are actually quite true about Doctor Who itself, she's kind of like spokesperson for it. And he ends up by saying, "Oh, just look." And he goes and opens the doors of the TARDIS and says, "What would you like?" And you get her reverse shot, and it's the cosmos, right? It's the universe out there. And she says, where do I go? And he went, "Out the door." And he pushes her out into space. Beautiful moment. Deleted scene. But here you've got a number of the Doctors, of course, and 15 down there, but also 2 of many other hybrid variations on the Doctor that come in from kind of like, sideways fiction and all sorts of things like that. But, of course, the thing is that the Doctor is... What's so intriguing about the Doctor and his space operatic journeys through time and space is that the Doctor is a massive problem with identity. Not just because there seem to be so many of them, but that the Doctor itself is a thing that violates a fundamental law of identity that is a fundamental law of universal world building. An unbending fundamentalist rule, I have to say, about world building. We could almost call it, like, being very simple, we call it the law of the excluded middle. That's to say that something cannot not be and cannot be at the same time. But the Doctor is a perfect example of the violation of that law. We mere mortals may not know entirely who we are. Our neurotic guilt defines us as never really knowing what our actual desire is, but that doesn't deny the possibility of complete self-knowledge as the task of life, right? It might be an impossible dream, but it's a dream nonetheless. It's the closure expected of a good death to a good life. Partial self-knowledge doesn't defy the rule of the excluded middle, but the psychopath who declares they know themselves absolutely does defy this rule. When Iago, the great villain of Shakespeare's Othello, announces, I am not what I am, he's not merely being deceptive and saying, you think I'm this, but I'm actually that. He says, I am this, and also I am not this. So from this, I think the exemption of the rule of the excluded middle, and by that, a kind of, as I say, fundamental law of world building, is in this protagonist of Doctor Who. After all, the question that runs through the entire series is, who is Doctor Who? He has his source, or he, she, it. The Doctor has its source, I should mention, not only in Dr. Caligari, but in a very famous fictional necromancer, Dr. Faustus, who makes a pact with the devil to obtain secret knowledge of itself, of life, just like Dr. Frankenstein. But recall, this is a character who's undergone 15 manifestations or incarnations, along with other avatars, even more vague and unstable in their identity. And that's through this 60 years long form saga, which has never gone anywhere, really. It's like Amy Pond, it's just been pushed into outer space. To my recollection, there's only one episode where he's actually given the moniker of Doctor Who, as if Who is a surname. Any Doctor Who aficionados here, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it happens in an episode in the first season with William Hartnell, a four-parter called The War Machines, and happens possibly as an accident or slackness of the script or even of the actor. Hartnell was notorious for missing lines and making things up. Everywhere else, the Doctor's only referred to as, quote, the Doctor. But there is a slip, I recall, when introduced as the Doctor, when introduced to a character as the Doctor, that character asks, as if mishearing introduction, who? To which the Doctor replies, yes. Now, moments like this, scripted or not, sting because they seem an anomaly. There's a bizarre discretion about actually naming this Doctor, as if the name is too indecent to utter. Thus, the Doctor is anonymous even though it goes through successive, highly identifiable personality manifestations as a sort of dynasty of one with a chain of consorts or travelling companions. The Doctor is immortal as a Time Lord, type of god, but distinct from extinct archaic races of dead gods in that universe. A diabolical anti-Messiah, yet Christ-like in a kind of C.S. Lewis manner, because of his sacrificial love of humanity. The Doctor knows the future as much as it knows the past, yet is always so taken by surprise by both, and remembers the future only by enacting it. The Doctor changes history, but only by performing its necessity, which seems to be a rebellious thing for the Doctor to do. And yet, the Doctor is nothing but pure contingency. A madman in a box is its self-description to Amy Pond at one point. It's a kind of renegade existence that disturbs history from its necessary inevitability. I could go on and on. I've got pages to go on. But the point is, of course, that the Doctor and the saga of the Doctor is something that takes you nowhere in particular and everywhere else, right? I think the Doctor is an agent for this capacity to unbuild a world rather than build one. And with that, I leave you to be absorbed into that universe completely.
Leon and Ted, thank you so much. That was really great.
And my apologies for going over time.
But you were early, Ted, so, you know.
All right. I don't know if anyone wants to talk to us about this, but we can get a drink from the bar, which is now open, I should point out. And